Okay, we are recording. We will go ahead and get started. So this will be called to order for the City of Livingston Planning Board, May 20th, 2020. Official start time 5:32. So
got it.
That's not too bad, seeing as we are all dealing with some new technology here. So I'll go ahead and do roll call real quick, just so we can get it on the record. Newts?
Here.
Weisbeck?
Here.
Holmes is gone, unable to attend today. O'Connor?
Here.
Jovic?
Here.
Wilcox?
Here.
And I am your host and chair, Brian Conkle. Thank you all for attending. We have a quorum. First of all, on the agenda, which I emailed out and which got posted, and we got an advertisement into the paper just in time. First of all, I want to welcome our newest board members, Stacy Jovic and Jessica Wilcox. Seems like a lifetime ago where we interviewed you and selected you and recommended you up to the commission for selection. So wanted to take the opportunity to formally thank you for being willing to provide your time and talents to the community. Both of you have great backgrounds, and I'm sure you're going to make great contributions as we move forward with the completion of the growth policy and the eventual implementation of that policy. A few things of orientation for both of you. I know I've talked with both of you on the phone, and I've sent you several emails on city website links and things to kind of get smart on. My apologies for the kind of the fire hose treatment of training, but that's kind of what's set up for these positions. A lot of this is kind of learn on the fly, and we'll talk a little bit more of that going forward, and we'll get you some more resources. There will be one thing that I do want to talk to the city manager about at some point, especially now that we have a new board that has just gotten stood up. Talk to him about, and I know this has been conversation before, about setting up a board training for the city kind of every year, especially after new members come on board at the beginning of the year. So that's something I need to take as an action to go forward with, because I think that would be definitely beneficial to you too. I think everything's definitely obviously been put sort of on hiatus because of COVID-19 and the city's responses. I know there was some discussion again about possibly doing some orientation things, but all that got kind of swept aside with other priorities. But haven't forgot about you too. We'll continue to try to figure out what things you need to do to get up to speed. But again, I just wanted to formally thank you for wanting to participate and welcome you to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of our new members, Jesse has volunteered to assist with minutes, so thank you so much for your help with that, Jesse.
I'll do my best. I'll be typing as we go. So. Well,
one thing, Jesse, I don't know if you saw the one attachment I had. The city does allow, based on the interpretation of state law, that really the recording that we have for this right now, so in Zoom and during our normal meetings, we'll have a recorder there, that is sufficient documentation for minutes, just as long as we supplement that with a written record, which basically is pretty basic. It doesn't include a lot. It's more of capturing who makes motions, attendance, and really time-stamped discussions. So you don't have to. I know previously we kind of deviated from that and kind of did informal minutes, but I don't think we really need to do that. I know we don't. The city doesn't do it for their commission meetings. They just date stamp major sections and who talked when. So bottom line, don't kill yourself.
Got it.
I think if somebody really is interested in what we have here, they'll pull up the recording and can look at it.
Okay.
So Jesse, the responsibilities for that is though to get the minutes to me. The city requests them that we get them to them for posting within 7 days after the meeting. So if you can get those, sometime, 5-6 days, that gives me enough time to review them and pop them up. And then the other thing I'll just ask you to help me with is monitoring our time. That's one thing I'm going to really stress more, and I'll talk about that a little bit here. Making sure we really try to stick to our agenda and stick to our time. So if I start deviating or drifting or we get too bogged down in comments, please help me get control again. Give me a nudge or raise your hand or something. But those are the two primary things I'll need assistance with, and appreciate that again. Thanks for stepping up.
Sure thing.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Melissa. I don't have code memorized, but I seem to remember that maybe for minutes, there's some requirement for like official votes in the minutes. And that would be something to check. It probably doesn't matter for this meeting, but if we start getting into things like subdivision reviews or updating, ordinances or whatever, or regulations, that would be something.
Thank you.
But
thanks.
Flag that. There's time to figure.
Yeah, and it's in the commission packet. So the board. I guess it's the commission and board packet that's out there on the website. I just need to relook at that again. I'm just writing a note to self here.
Brian, if it's anything like this is Frank. If there's anything like the county planning board meetings, when we're at the courthouse, they record all of that, and like you said, the minutes that we keep, that Jessica would keep, would be just high points, like you said, and then all of that stuff would be recorded. If anybody wanted to see it, it's just there to go look at, get all the details from. So I don't. Everything would be there no matter what, I think. Yeah,
but in the like I said, in the packet for the commission and boards, there is a breakdown exactly of the interpretation that was made, which allows us to do that and what needs to be captured. So, Melissa, I will go back and double check that, and Jesse, I'll shoot you that information so that you know exactly what we are required to capture in that. And if you're ever interested too, you can go to the city commission website and look at the minutes that they do that are completed, and you can see kind of what we're talking about. But I forwarded you the template in a previous email. So one thing I'm going to do, which this will be really just for this meeting, is kind of talk a little bit more administrative comments up front, just because this is my first meeting as chair. So I just want to kind of lay out a few, maybe some changes and just a few expectations, and kind of focus on how I'd like to just administratively operate within the meeting structure. So first of all, bear with me. Again, this is, I've chaired several meetings in my life, but this is my first time with this planning board. We're all using this new technology, so please bear with me until I kind of pick up my rhythm here a little bit. But thanks again for the trust that you all put into me to be the chair. I'll definitely do my best to try to keep us on task and try to make this enjoyable for everybody. One thing that was talked about quite a bit at our last meeting, no, not quite a bit, but it was definitely referenced. It was discussed a little bit. And one thing that I'm very conscious of is respect for your time. We're all very busy. We've got many things going on. So I do want to try to keep these meetings moving along. So please don't get offended if I do maybe scoot you along a little bit. We all get a little winded sometimes, and I may ask for you to try to, make your point and move on so that we can try to stick with the agenda. So please don't be offended. That's my overall goal. We'll never cut off any I mean, if we need to talk about something in depth, we will do it. But there's times where I may try to get things moving on a little bit. My goal, this meeting I scheduled for an hour and a half. That was mostly due to the technology. I just want to make sure that we and the public had an opportunity to try to be involved if we could. So I gave a little more time in case we needed it. But I'm really going to try to limit the meetings to no later than an hour and 15 minutes. And if we do go beyond that, we'll vote to do so. I want to make sure that everybody, again, is buys in if we're gonna go long, that we vote on that. I am not a Robert's Rules expert nor a real lover of them, but I do appreciate the organization they provide. So we won't be using those, you know, per the rules themselves. But we will use some of that structure though. The one thing that I want to try to get away from, where we've kind of fallen into this sometimes, is during the meeting, we, instead of talking about specific areas, we sort of start going into a discussion phase where we'll be talking amongst ourselves and kind of lose track of the conversation. So the one thing I do want to, the one aspect of the Roberts Rules I definitely want to make sure we're implementing is sort of really what the commission does in, you know, I will give you all an opportunity to speak, but we'll try to let you speak and not really have a conversation. You'll be able to give your point of view, and then we'll go around again if anybody wants to address those points. So if we need a lot of back and forth discussion on topics, then we'll set up a work session. I think that'll probably make things flow a little bit easier. I will let you know that probably before many of the topics, I will frame the discussion, just to give you some of my initial thoughts on it, to try to frame it and bound it more than anything else. So do expect that. Again, for no other reason than to just kind of frame the topic and make sure that we can sort of stay on track with the subject that's within the agenda. The one thing that I'm really going to try to focus on this meeting and probably the next meeting is just a little bit of stabilization. For our two new people, you don't really know sort of the history of all what's happened within the board in the last year, and it's through no fault of our own. It's been a little chaotic. You know, about a year ago, the planning board and the zoning board, they were one board and they split apart. So new people were hired into both of those. We had a new county representative was brought in after our first meeting. Right after our first meeting, we had our first subdivision approval, which none of us, I will say quite frankly, were probably really ready or prepared for. We had two of our members decide that they wanted to resign earlier than their normal tour would be. I'm a new chair, so we've had a lot of churn and a lot of, I would say, instability, again, through no fault of our own. It's just the way it happened. And you throw a pandemic on that and it gets kind of crazy. So one thing I'm going to try to do is just get us kind of into a new normal. Try not to, you know, get over energetic in what we're going to expect to accomplish. Like I said, I respect all of your time. I also respect that you all are incredibly busy and have a lot of extra responsibilities, I'm sure, due to COVID. So we're going to try to figure out a pace that works for all of us, try to make this enjoyable, and also try to provide some benefit to the city and the commission. So those are my administrative comments. Does anybody have any questions or comments on those before we move on? Okay. Hearing nothing, we'll move on to the approval of the February, boy, it's been a long time, hasn't it? The February 12th meeting minutes. One point I do want to make, and it's in the agenda, when I did the meeting minutes for February, I did an addendum to add these two links that are in the agenda, the Montana Planning Board Members Handbook and the Montana Growth Policy Resource Book. So some of you might have missed that in the addendum to the update to the meeting minutes. So I just want to make sure that these were posted here because I think these are good resources to share and to have. So I'll open it up for any discussion to see if anybody has any comments about the minutes from February. Okay, hearing nothing, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I'll do that. I'll motion to approve them.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Second.
Second for Scott, thank you. I'll just go all four, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we have unanimous consent. Thank you. Okay, moving on to old business. One thing that I'm going to always add to the agenda as an old business item, because it's old but it's new, we always talk about it, is the growth policy in general. The first thing on the agenda I'm always going to have is something called general updates. And what I want to do there is leave that as an opportunity for anybody that may have some updates regarding the growth policy. And that'll typically probably be Shannon, since he's a city employee. He may hear something or know something. Most cases, it'll probably be Melissa, since she hears these things at the commission meetings. Or myself, who I usually try to watch the recordings for all the commission meetings just so I can keep a pulse of what's going on. So we'll start with some general updates, and seeing Shannon is not here, Melissa, I'm going to start with you. Is there any updates that you'd like to provide? I did hear the last part of the commission meeting last night, so I did hear the discussion there, but would you like to kind of recap sort of where we are from a city perspective, from Mike Carta's perspective on that, please?
Before we do that, Brian,
yeah.
Point of order, just want to acknowledge that I don't believe we have anybody from the public on. So therefore, have any public comment, and we're, I think, obligated to ask 3 times if there's public comment, but since nobody's joined in, I don't think we need to do that, but just for clarification, there's nobody on the public on this call, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Thanks. Speaking about waiting for me to get into my rhythm, I appreciate that. It's in the agenda and everything. So yeah, I will just verify one more time. Is anybody from the public on, which I've let everybody on, and I don't think I missed anybody, but I'll just check to see if there's any public comment. Okay, if there's not, thanks again, Scott, appreciate that. So back to the growth policy. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about what was discussed last night and anything else you may have known or heard about this?
Sure. So the commission has been asking Michael to give the city manager, Michael Carters, to give us updates on the timeline. It seems that things are still moving forward at the expected pace. The first draft of current conditions, so remember, that's not the hopes and dreams. Current conditions is like, where are we right now? So it's putting all the data together in a format to explain where we are. And as a community, that's what current conditions is. The first draft of that is going to be available early next week. It sounds like the very initial draft went to the city staff and they gave feedback to Burton. So the first draft for the public to see will be early next week. That is the big news. For the growth policy, I did ask Brian, I did ask Michael last night. I made the request that it's a good time, since he's had some conversations with the contractors about public meetings, and what the role of the contractors will be like potentially, or what it will look like in Livingston potentially, depending what phase we're in. I told him that it would be a good time for the planning board to hear where we're at, because it will save us work if we know what's being planned already. We don't have to like reinvent the wheel. So I said, I think that the thing that makes the most sense is if he could update you as the board chair, and that you could share that information with all of us. Just let me know if you get that from him or if you don't, and I can follow up with him.
Yeah.
To make sure that comes to you. That's really the big growth policy. The other thing though that would, for general updates, is that there was an announcement made that they did hire, the city hired a new deputy planning director, and that person will start the 1st of July. And it's someone that's coming from Gallatin County. I'm not sure if it's it was a Bozeman staff person or a Gallatin County staff person. I'm not remembering right now, but so it's somebody that's nearby that understands what's happening in our part of the world. So I just wanted to share that. But that's all for growth policy specific.
Yeah, thank you.
Updates.
Thank you. Yeah, I heard the way Mike said it. He said it was somebody from Gallatin County planning, planning, whatever the proper word is. So sounds like county instead of city, but that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that'll be helpful. I think for Mike to get with Burton to kind of let us know what they're thinking. I also know from the previous meeting as well, Michael said he was going to get with them to see what type of technology or process for engagement. So when we have to do our public hearings, what they've been doing or have experience doing, so that we can review that to see if that'll be sufficient to meet our needs, especially in the light of the COVID. Thanks, Melissa, too. I heard you, as we talked about previously, telling them that we'd like to have several options, things like even being able to mail in comments in case people just don't feel comfortable with the technology or feel comfortable being in crowds. So that'll be good to get that information. That'll kind of give us a vector on where we need to head over the next few months. Are there any other general updates on the growth policy that anybody knows, if anybody knows anything, heard anything, or would like to comment on before we move to the next agenda item?
I would share one thing. Mm-hmm. And I think there was an email that the whole, Brian, I think you got it. I can't remember if it was forwarded to the whole board. I have heard, and this is just for transparency, so we all have the same information on the planning board. I have had some community members come to me, and they're very concerned about how COVID is changing or impacting the housing market in Livingston, and concerns about will the growth policies still be relevant in light of the pandemic. And so some of the topics are like, how are Airbnbs changing? Some human migration might be happening and people are coming to Montana. And so the housing market is continuing to be extremely hot, if not hotter than it was before. Just some general topics I think that are on people's minds. And then PCEC sent out a Park County Environmental Council. I'll try to get away from acronyms. They did send out some sort of letter with similar concerns, wanting to make sure things were relevant in light of the pandemic. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, not because we need to take action on it right now, but just so you know what's on the mind of folks in the community as we're thinking about the growth policy.
Thank you. I did receive the Park County Environmental Council email, and I did forward that to everybody on the board just for your everybody's awareness, just to have that on there. No, thanks. Those are good points. We'll just have to kind of see. Yeah, it's going to be like putting together the growth policy is like going to be probably trying to change the tires on a moving vehicle. It's going to be kind of interesting. So we'll kind of see how that goes. Any other general updates, items of discussion under that category before we move on?
Hi, this is Jessie. I have a quick question about the growth. about the growth policy. Can that be amended after it's written? Or does it have to wait until the next sort of review process?
I don't see why it couldn't. It's required by law to be done every 5 years. If the city commission decided that, the view on the ground has changed that dramatically, maybe like a year from now, they could task us or the city to, either us, the board, to go and update it, or maybe just go get feedback from the community to see if it needs updating. So yeah, it's required every 5 years, but I don't see why at the discretion of the commission we couldn't update it if we needed to. So that's a good point.
Okay.
One thing that we should probably try to remember though is, this is going to come as a complete document, the one that we get. It's going to be a fairly large document, I hope. We should probably try to remember to see if we can get the editable version of that delivered to us same as with the final prettied up version, I guess, for lack of a better word, just for that very reason. That's a great point. We may, something may change where just one chapter of it, we may want a complete tweak. We don't want to start from scratch and rewrite it. So that's a good point. I'll try to remember that, of getting a editable copy if that's available.
Because my assumption was that we would be receiving the draft, and then it's the planning board sort of responsibility to go through that draft and make sure that we feel that everything that we heard from the public, or what we feel is necessary to be in there, is in there, and then we edit that document and send it back, and then they kind of make some changes, and then it comes back and goes up for approval. Is that how it goes, or what we get is the final and we just?
No, there's definitely a draft period in there.
Okay.
And so we do that. You're 100% right. That's really going to be our role. And that's, as Melissa said, that's really what she's gone back to Mike Cardos now as we're getting closer to that draft being ready,
Okay.
and saying, okay, Burton, what's kind of your schedule? What are you looking for? What type of capabilities do you have for this community engagement? Well, we've always thought, and it is in statute, that we are responsible for doing really the public input for it. Really, the goal of our board should be is we should do what we're hoping to be able to provide is the city commission a really good package at the end, where that meeting where it's presented to them as a final document, that there's not a lot of more community input, meaning that we've pretty much done the heavy lifting at that point. So the draft hits the streets, gives the community an opportunity to review it, and then we have, however many public sessions to get people's inputs on the draft of things that they like or don't like. I envision that we would go through that, then go through those comments. A lot of them are probably going to be repetitive comments, so we kind of package that into one group. Some things aren't going to be applicable. We kind of throw that out. And then we get that up to the vendor, the contractor, and say, thanks for the draft. We've gone and vetted this with the community. We would like you to make these updates based on what we've heard.
Okay.
It's that process that we have to work through at this point, as far as what schedule, where we are as far as a community and able to meet or not meet, how many times we're going to want to meet. But that's kind of the way I envision this going forward. And then giving them time to get a finalized version together, and then getting that up to the city commission for approval. Again, our hope is that it's that when it goes in front of the commission, there's really not much discussion. Hopefully the community feels like they've had an opportunity to review it and speak to it. Again, just because you have a concern doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get input in there, but at least you had an opportunity to be heard.
Mm-hmm. And then I had another kind of ask. I think you sent out, and this was public, where the results of the survey that Burton did with the community initially. But there weren't any comments in there. Do we get to see those comments from that survey?
Well, what I envision, yeah, that was just rough. Those were just the rough
Okay.
kind of inputs. What I envision, at least what's been conveyed, is that Burton is taking all the inputs that they got, either written or on the website or in person, and taking those and wrapping it kind of in context. I doubt they're going to have every comment.
Okay.
Just like I said, when we do the public sessions, we're not going to send every comment up. Some just aren't going to be applicable. Some are going to be duplicative and things like that. But no, what's been expected to be provided is again a comprehensive package with all that context in there.
Okay.
So we'll get to see it. We'll get to see their edited version of it, and we'll have to make the determination then whether we think that's sufficient.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Next item is the one thing I asked Melissa to do is just kind of close the loop. At the February meeting, a discussion topic was there were some people within the community that felt that the planning board should be really running the entire show, for lack of a better word. And Melissa, you can clarify if I'm misstating that, but really that the board is the one that should have been running the growth policy from the start, that the city really should not have had the role that they had, for lack of a better word. That went to the city attorney for interpretation, and there was a ruling made on that by the city attorney. So, Melissa, can you please clarify everything that I just jumbled there and let us know what kind of came out of that, please?
Yeah, I think that your assessment was accurate. There was persistent concerns that the planning board did not have a large enough role. And so we got clarification from the city attorney, and she said that yes, everything was on the up and up. This is how contracts work. And you have the city staff administer the contracts because we're a volunteer board that won't have the capacity for tight turnarounds, nor tight turnarounds with all of the notice that's required. So administratively, this is why the executive branch does contracts, not for volunteer boards. But also that we were totally doing it the correct way. The additional information that was offered from other commissioners, because I think at this point, most of the other commissioners at some point have been on the planning board, or at least deeply aware of what's happening on the planning board. Darrell was on the planning board for a couple years, and she said, we absolutely want the city doing it right now and not the planning board. The previous discussions, the last time the growth policy was updated, they worked on it for like, I don't even remember how long she said, over a year or 2 years. And it was like, they got a tiny bit updated. It wasn't a comprehensive update. And so she was saying the commission absolutely wanted the contractors working with the city because we wanted a robust update that was really thorough. And that the planning board hadn't been able to achieve that in the past. So I hope that's helpful and makes sense. It's sort of like when the boards change people, there sometimes that information is with the people that were on the board previously. So it was helpful for clarification, and I think it helped clarify, and it helped clarify with the people that were having concerns about the process. And then Frank, of course, shared that this was the role of the county planning board also when the county growth policy was updated, that the heavy lifting was with the board and it was the review process. So yeah, so I think that's over with, and we don't have to, I don't see any reason to keep it on the agenda either. If you guys have questions, let me know.
Okay. Any questions for Melissa on that? Okay, thank you, Melissa. That was helpful. The next 3 items are action items from the previous meeting. First action item was Scott Weisbeck. So Scott was the chair at that time. Communicate with Michael Cardos regarding Burton's statement about meeting with all boards. Has this previously been approved, et cetera? Really some background about that at a public meeting, or excuse me, a meeting with the boards in the city. Burton made that comment. Because we were transitioning between chairs, I followed up with the city, and we did get confirmation back from Faith that no, Burton was not going to be meeting with the boards again. They were not planning on doing that. That was not in their scope. So the answer to that question is no. Is there any further discussion required on this? Or let me ask, is there any other discussion on this? Does anybody want to bring anything up regarding this action item?
How many times have you met with Burton?
We have not. So,
Ever?
no, we have not. There was, and that's one area that was kind of a sticking point, quite frankly, with the board or members of the board, was interpretation of the contract, in that there is some perception, and I don't know ground truth to tell you the truth, that the board, that Burton was supposed to meet with the board. They felt that they did that when they had an orientation with multiple board chairs and the city at the very beginning. Whether that meets the intent or the contract, I don't know, but they have not met with the board, with any of the boards, as far as I know, individually. They've just met with them collectively. And to be fair, they met another time as well. They had a group gathering to bring in board members and the city to provide kind of an update on where they were and to get some input there. So there was that, but in the sense that they've ever come to the planning board and sat down and briefed us or really engaged with us, that never did occur. Any other questions on this topic? Okay. Moving on, with the assumption that there were going to be more meetings with boards, we added the additional action item of having the board to consider timing and topics for future meeting with Burton, i.e. timing around July draft delivery to the board, which was the schedule as we knew it then, discuss plan of action on how to proceed, etc. I think on this one now, things we've been basically told that we are not to expect to meet with Burton as a board. I think our communication with Burton at this point is really going to flow through the city, seeing the city is the contracting officer for this effort to make sure that all items stay within scope. What I'm going to propose at this time is that we close out this action item, instead waiting until we get communication from Burton through the city, as Melissa talked about, back to me, hopefully me, and then I get this out to you all on what the proposal is at that time as far as how they are proposing to proceed that's within scope of the existing contract. I think once we have that plan, then we can look at that and then come up with our recommendations. If they come out and say, well, we do this for several communities, this is how we've done it in the past, this is how we propose doing that, then we can look at that and discuss it and see if that's something that we think is sufficient or not, and then take that up to the city commission as a recommendation to either approve or to request modifications to the city. That's my proposal on that action item, would be to then to close it then and go with that course of action. Does anybody want to discuss that or have a different thought on that? how to proceed.
I have something about that, just real
Sure.
quick. Don't mind.
Go
I think we'll want to look at the city commission for guidance on how they want to proceed with the growth policy after we get it, right? We want to know how much community outreach do they want to do, how many comments do they want to hear, how long do they want to take, so we can go through all that. So I don't know, I think it's up to the city commission about how we proceed with that growth policy after we get it from them, but I'm not certain of that. But that's kind of how it went with the county anyway.
Okay, no, and that's a good point, Frank. I honestly don't know how this is going to fall. Like I said, this latest update from Melissa's about 24 hours old right now.
Yeah.
To be fair to the city, this has not really been on their radar scope. They've been pretty focused on COVID phase 1 implementation and activities. So I think Michael said that he's had 1, maybe 2 conversations with them, but it's sort of really been on a pause, I think, for the most part. So I think we should give Michael, the city, some time to have that now that we're kind of entering phase 2. The city commission now, I think, has met twice since we originally went into restrictions. So I think everybody's kind of re-getting their footing. So I don't know, honestly, how this is going to flow, but I think we're going to have to kind of be flexible and wing it a little bit here. If everybody's okay with that, is let's let the city have their conversation, see what comes down, and we may have to have a conversation either with the commission and, I don't know which tail is going to wag the dog, if it's going to be the commission kind of telling us or we telling them what we'd like to do. But I think at this point we just need to kind of wait until we get something back.
Yeah.
So kind of be on a strategic pause, for lack of a better word. Does anybody have any other conversation or concerns with this?
Well, I guess
Okay.
it seems
sorry,
to
go
me, it seems to me though that if you're on strategic pause and you get asked the question, well, what does the planning board want to do? And you have had no discussion, then you're not able to say, well, the planning board has these 3 ideas.
Right. Yeah. So one of the problems that we do have is, there is a contract that requires certain deliverables from the contractor within certain time frames. And I assume that a lot of that's up for negotiation right now because of COVID. All I can say at this point is I know what the statutes require of us, and is that we have public hearings on this, on the policy, and that we make a recommendation up to the commission. So if we get asked that question, I think that's about as good as we can say right now. I don't feel compelled to, I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole, quite frankly, and no offense to you, Tracy, because we've been down this rabbit hole so many times over the last year. This has been difficult for this board, for some members of this board, on how this whole thing has happened. And I think we're kind of at a new starting point, and I don't think it's going to benefit us very much to lean too far forward at this point, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think we need to let the city and Burton run with it a little bit, come back to us with their recommendations on how to proceed, and then let's go from there. I think we can all kind of formulate some ideas in our head. We can start thinking about what we'd like it to look like. Frank gave us kind of a rundown of how they did it with the county, and maybe at a future meeting we'll have Frank, you can run that down again, because I think that's sort of the way most of us were leaning, but I'd rather not go down that right now. I'd prefer to let the city and Burton come to us with what their approach would look like, and especially what kind of technology and stuff they think what kind of technology and process they can have to meet the requirements in light of in case we can't have large public gatherings. So I'd like for them to run with it if everybody's okay with that.
Well, you do have an answer, so that's all that that I needed to hear.
Okay. All right, any other discussion on that action item? Okay. The next action item was discussion on possibly expanding the number of citizen members on the board. Right now, according to the statutes, and I've got the reference there in the agenda, we are required to have at least 4 citizen members. And so that's Tracy, Jesse, myself, and Scott. There was discussion that was brought up at the last meeting that with 2 of us rotating out every year potentially, unless we get reselected for another term, that with 3 officer positions, it immediately means kind of by default that at least one of the 2 new people are put into a officer position. So like we had here, had to talk, Jesse had to volunteer to help out with minutes and things like that. So it kind of forces folks maybe into taking leadership roles that they wouldn't normally want to take, like being chair or vice chair earlier. I thought that was kind of valid, but one thing that I want to put up to the group is shortly after I got selected to be chair, I met with Jim Woodhull, who's our city planning director, and just picked his brain on a few things. I wanted to get his advice on the planning board and kind of going ahead. And I talked to him about that, and he offered up a piece of information that I hadn't heard before, and so my guess is several of you, or maybe all of you, hadn't heard before either. With the growth policy, there is a transitional area included in that policy, meaning it is the city boundary plus 2.5 miles outside of that boundary as well, so that transition area. And Jim said that the intent of the city has been, with the approval of the growth plan, to potentially look at zoning that area and therefore adding 2 more citizen members just through that action. He said that was really the intent of including that extra transitional area. So this question on the table may be moot or overcome by events, just to the fact that right now it's the city's intent, and obviously that would require commission approval if it goes that way, to increase the board by 2 members, and thereby kind of taking care of one of our concerns, but also ensuring there's representation for those people that are kind of in that, I'll use the term donut, even though I know everybody hates that, in that donut area. So what I'm going to recommend is we table this for now and see how that proceeds. But I want to check to see if anybody has any thoughts or comment on that.
I have one, Brian.
Sure.
So, the city planning board, we're supposed to pick a couple members to be on the joint city county planning board because of that expanded zone around the city. And the county has people picked for it, but we've just been waiting because the city hasn't picked anything because they don't have a growth policy. I think we've had this discussion before. So I don't know. I'm with you on the tabling it to see what happens, because I don't know if we need to add more board members to the city planning board when we can have kind of a small board, made up of county and city planning board members that kind of help figure out that area and figure out a better way for the county and the city to get along.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up again. I'd forgotten about that previous conversation.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
I think there's a term for it, like territorial zone. Is that right, Scott? There's some like term for that area, but it's not like citizens of Livingston. It's, you have to find people that are within that perimeter.
Right.
So it's a little bit different. And I thought the other thing that was, but I think also to Frank's point, I think, yes, that was put on pause, having the city, because I remember following up with Michael Cardus about this at some point in the last, however long we've been having this conversation. I think that was put on pause for the growth policy, like you said, for the city's growth policy. The other thought, I believe, under this topic was the idea of a youth seat, since the Conservation Board has a youth seat. So that's someone between the ages of like 15 and 19. And it's a 1-year term that lines up with the school year. I don't know that now's the best time for all the reasons you talked about with stabilization. I don't know that now's the best time to grow the board beyond 7, just because we're in a state of flux. But the other thing to consider, if we do a youth seat at some point, would be that voting members, I believe by Montana code, must be freeholders,
Yes.
landowners. So that would mean that the youth seat would not have a vote in the same way that the rest of us have a vote. So that's just and making a note of that part of the conversation.
I think one other thing to add, and everybody on this board didn't experience the board when I first was a board member, was we had a very difficult time getting a quorum.
Yeah.
And so when you have a larger group, especially in our summer vacation months, there will be probably limited participation by some of us. I know everybody's super dedicated, but in my past position with this board, it was oftentimes very difficult to get a quorum.
No, thanks. Yeah, you're right. We haven't, none of us have been around long enough. I know also going in and up until really, I would say the last year or two, I know it was hard getting people just to volunteer to be board members. And that there was always that kind of limitation at, not growing the boards too much because, well, like I just said, because they couldn't get enough people. I think that's changed quite a bit in the last year or two from what I've seen and heard. One thing I am cognizant of as well, we are a pretty big board already with 7 members. And, making sure that everybody has the opportunity to talk and participate, and still try to respect everybody's time and try to keep these meetings somewhat manageable within a time frame, that can get difficult with expansion as well. But so I guess at this point, let me just see if anybody else has any discussion topics or questions on that. Okay. At this point, I think I'm going to recommend then that we table this, really, and kind of see how things flow with this from the city perspective. Again, their intent is to have this transitional area and include that and zone that, which would mean by default more participation. So is everybody okay with going on hold on this right now, or do we want to proceed with some other motion? Okay. So hearing nothing, we'll just kind of, again, stabilize and kind of resituate ourselves. moving on to new business, and sorry, like I said, I'm already running more over schedule than I wanted to, so I'll try to be brief here. One thing that I talked to Shannon about that we'd like to do is on new business is have him just give a quick 5-minute update to the community on projects that are happening within the city, and again, just to inform us so that we can make better decisions on our recommendations, but also to inform the community in general on kind of what's happening. So he shot me an email just before the meeting started with a few things, and I'm just going to read these off. I don't have any other details besides what's listed here, but here's 4 things that he gave updates on. Eagles Landing 3, so this is behind the Albertsons there. This is the 12 condo, he said 12 condo unit development on Loves Lane is going well. The first unit is scheduled to be completed in mid-August. The next update was the HRDC housing. I believe this is FEMA housing that was obtained by HRDC. It says 12 smaller homes were recently set on the foundations near Reservoir Street. Site grading and landscaping still needs to be completed. The next is on Brookstone. That's the one sort of over in that near the transfer station area. I said city planning recently received 5 sets of plans for 4plexes there, in addition to the 2 units currently being built. And the final update is for Northtown Phase 2 and 3. It says construction is scheduled to restart on June 1st in that area, with completion scheduled for late July. So those are all the updates I have. I can't answer any follow-on questions. You'll just have to keep those for Shannon. Moving on, again, I'm going to try to rush through this now a little bit here. Future training opportunities for discussion. As we try to reset ourselves and kind of wait for the city and Burton to catch up probably a bit, one thing that I thought would be useful to do within our codes or the state law, two of our primary responsibilities as the board is to ensure the growth policy gets completed and updated every 5 years, and also to make sure that we are involved in the subdivision approval process. As I mentioned earlier, a handful of us got thrust into that on our first week in the jobs, and it was pretty rough, quite frankly. It was hard to. It was a big, steep learning curve, and I didn't even leave that feeling really comfortable with everything. So, one thing I did in my conversation with Jim Woodhull, I did ask him if he would be up for providing us a training session on that, because we have two brand new members, new county member, a few of us still new to the process. He said he would. He did commit to that back in February when we talked. Things have changed. I sent him an updated email last week, or excuse me, earlier this week, asking if we could maybe shoot for doing that next month, and I haven't heard back from him yet. So I did just want to let you know that unless anybody has really big heartburn on it, what I'd like to do for next meeting is really try to get him in here and get us all trained while we might have a little bit of an opportunity to pause before going into the growth policy. One thing with the subdivision approval process, it does have very strict timelines, so we don't have a lot of time to kind of get up to speed. And so it'd be good for us to have this information, this training now, so that if and when that request comes, that we're ready to go. Anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns with that?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed. I'll still try to follow up, and we'll see if we can get him scheduled for our June meeting. Another training opportunity, and again, maybe our timeline isn't as good as it used to be here, but there is an opportunity for traditional neighborhood development and planning policies meeting. I attended something that that was a meeting that was, or a get together that was scheduled, I think, gosh, back in January now. And I had included the slide deck in there for everybody to review. It was volunteered to us to come, and for that individual from MSU to come and talk to the planning board and give kind of an abbreviated version of that presentation if we wanted it. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to look at the slide deck, but I did want to offer that up, that we could try to, set that up if we wanted to. I think now timing may be not on our side for that, depending on what the schedule is with the growth policy. But if by chance Burton slides to the right, we could potentially do this in July if people are interested. If I could get it scheduled, if we could work that. So I'll just open that up as a discussion topic. Did anybody have an opportunity to review that? Is there any interest in this?
I actually accidentally printed it twice. So,
it's a
if
big slide deck too.
needs a copy, I have the 30-page document twice. I was kind of thinking that maybe the subdivision policy training would be lend itself to some of the discussion points that are in that slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be something if we can wait and see how the subdivision, and if you have questions, then you could possibly see in July
Sure.
if we needed more.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on that?
I think if anybody in this group has a specific item they like in that slide deck and they want to pursue to make changes to our current code. So if we were to get a subdivision today, we couldn't start up trying to apply any of those type of documents. We have to go by what's in our current regs. And so we just have to keep that in mind with subdivision review, as our code is old. I wouldn't say it's the best code, but it's what we have to live by. And so just bear that in mind. If we want a specific thing to change, then we typically, I would recommend that this board says consensus, we want to change X. We go present that up to the commission in some format, and they provide a directive back for us to make whatever change or whatever we desire to change, and then we make a recommendation back up to them. That's kind of how the process works. If we want to change the code or change a part of the code, we would have to get direction from the commission, or I guess approval to move in that direction, and they ultimately make the decision to make that change to the code.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification and background. And so I think that was my intent, and maybe I should have said that too at the beginning. I think one thing that I thought why this training may be worthwhile is to educate us on what may be possible out there, what's happening in other communities, so that we had a little bit better knowledge of what we would maybe want to change the code to if we wanted to change the code. So again, this is kind of going back to what I said at the beginning. This is sort of a strategic pause to get us resituated, maybe retrained, maybe, make use of our time while we have a little bit of time to just get us a little bit smarter on some things as they relate to planning. But thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, I thought I heard in one of our kind of growth policy meetings that PCEC had hosted that the subdivision code should be updated before the growth policy. Does anybody on this planning board know if that's true? And if so, is that the responsibility of the planning board to update the subdivision code?
No, so I don't think that's true. Somebody can correct me if they're wrong. Again, we're mandated to update the policy every 5 years, so I'm not sure that they could, as Scott mentioned, the codes for the city of Livingston are very out of date. I do know in previous conversations or presentations or meetings that, and I think it's in the strategic plan, and Melissa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that sort of the idea has been to get the growth policy done, and then once that's complete, use that as an opportunity to then start relooking at all of our codes. And that's going to be like a 2-year process, is my understanding, to, you know, review the codes. And again, it depends on where it falls within the strategic plan of the city that the commission approves. The commission may say, well, yeah, we need to do codes at some point, but it's not our priority now. I've never heard of, I mean, the growth policy is not a, even though it says policy, it's not a strict, it's not a strict policy, meaning it's guidelines.
Document.
Yeah, it's a guiding document. So I think that's going to be established to help guide the code rewrite, not the other way around.
Okay. Is that, Frank, do you know if that's how the county, did the county update their subdivision code before the growth policy? No, they didn't.
I don't know that, sure, but I know that, I think, you know, Brian's on the right track with this. The growth policy will guide us into things we need to be looking at and how we need to proceed. Maybe it is updating our codes. Maybe, you know what I mean? It'll be the thing that we'll then have to decide, what do we want to focus on out of this document? If it's broad like the county's was, you know, we've barely scratched the surface of what we want to work on. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I respond to that, Brian? Because I remember that meeting. If it's the one I'm thinking of, Jessica, it's so it's growth policy, big and broad, and then it's the subdivision, and there's lots of different terms. It gets really jargony really quickly. So it starts with the growth policy, and then it was looking at subdivision regulations. So that's what you're asking about. And then the part of the conversation at that particular meeting got into planned unit developments or neighborhood plans.
Zoning.
And so it gets like more and more specific as you come in. So the idea that we keep returning to on the boards and at the commission is we need the big picture before these boards dive into the weeds. And then plan unit development is something that we've talked about at this board, and that's even like more specific than just broad subdivision regulations.
Okay.
So it's like we're doing this right now. So we don't want to get in the weeds on a specific topic before we know that was my takeaway from it.
Okay.
Or that's been my takeaway over and over again.
Got it. Thanks.
And I wanted to add one thing. I would hope that our new city planner will take a more active role in talking, you know, trying to help guide us in the directions we're going as well.
And Brian, can I say one more thing also?
Yes.
To in regards to what Frank just said, yes, maybe it would be great if Matthew could come and we could meet him after he starts and be a part of the process with Jim. And the other thing would be when we're talking about these neighborhood developments, yes, to what Scott said, if there's something that jumps out, we shouldn't wait to talk about it. If there's something we're excited about, we should bring it up. And then the third thing would be for some of these trainings that are more general, maybe that would be the time to invite the zoning commission to see if there's a way it could be planning/zoning, since some of the topics or conversations will be their role, not our role. Like even as I'm looking at the slide deck, some things might, what was it that you brought up, Scott, with our subdivision review that's still not been addressed? It was looking at compatible use.
Yeah, there is a ton of crossover, and oftentimes when people speak to the planning board, they bring up zoning, and there's a clear delineation of a legal right to zone and what you can do with a legal right. And that's kind of over on one side, and then the subdivision sets that code sets the framework. So for example, if you have a auto parts store, that belongs in a certain zone district, right? So that's a zoning issue. But how many trees go on the lot, that can be a planning issue. And so there's those type of things that you have to ask yourself, is that a planning issue or is that a zoning issue? And oftentimes that line is blurred because I think mostly the general public doesn't understand it.
And then not that far in our past, we had the planning and the zoning was
Yes.
one
Was
set
one
of
and the same,
people.
exactly.
So as it pulled apart, it's been like this sort of like rude awakening of who does what. But so anyway, Brian, my point is that for some of the more general things, that could be a fun time to collaborate and
great.
learn more broadly.
That's a great suggestion. Any other conversation on that? So the one comment, I think, well, there are a lot of great comments, but I think sort of the feel of this was go with the subdivision approval process training first, maybe see where we are as far as growth policy and what we got out of that subdivision training before we proceed with this. Is that kind of a good summary? So maybe hold on this for a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I won't pursue right now, but we'll kind of keep it on hold and on as a potential opportunity. And if we do go forth with it, we'll also invite zoning to participate. I think that's a great idea. One thing I added is a bit of new business here. Don't really want to talk about it too much, just more to introduce the topic and have people take a look at it. I do think that we should all take some time to look at the planning board bylaws and figure out what we want in there. I think it was kind of created by the city, sort of they had to create standard bylaws across all boards, and they're kind of cookie cutter. That's not a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just making the point, but there's some things that we probably want to put in our bylaws, maybe a little more specificity. So a couple examples of things I was thinking about is like public comments, maybe put in our bylaws how much time we limit for those, or our meetings, what our normal length of time is and things like that. So the only thing I wanted to do was introduce this as a topic, ask you all to take a look at the bylaws. And so this will be a homework assignment. Look at the bylaws and see if there's anything that we may want to add, change, remove. I added this link. This link, unfortunately, this is in our, if you go to our SharePoint site on the planning board and you go to the documents in there, our bylaws are in there and it's this link. But what this link is it takes you to the entire commission packet, which is almost 80 pages long, and the bylaws are included in there that got approved at the time. And I think this was like February 2nd of last year. So I'll see if Faith has just a electronic copy of just our bylaws and email that out to you. But I would like for all of you, again, to just as a homework assignment, look at those bylaws and see if there's anything in there that's good, bad, or ugly, and that we may want to update. Any questions or comments on that?
Appreciate you finding the abbreviated copy.
Yeah, sorry, after I hit the link later, that's when I realized what I have there, and it's a bit big. Okay, so that's new business. We'll go ahead and start with wrap up. We'll go ahead and do board comments. I'm going to start with Frank. Frank, you got anything you'd like to discuss?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Stacy, again, welcome. Any comments or statements you'd like to make?
Nope, I think I'm still in the listening, learning phase.
We all are. Okay, thank you. Jesse, how about you? Any comments you'd like to make today?
Nope, not at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Melissa, do you have anything else you'd like to say today?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I am looking at your faces and I'm so happy to see all of you. And I'm so happy about all the people that are on this board. And I'm super grateful that you're all in this space and we're doing this together. I'm feeling like I could live as a hermit forever, but if I'm going to be around people, I'm glad that it's you guys. So, like, I'm feeling really grateful, a lot of gratitude right now for all of you today, because I know this is going to be, we're going to talk about hard things. And I think this is an awesome group of people to talk about hard things with. So I'm really excited that you're all here. And I know it was like a really bumpy process to get the 7 of us together. I'm including Shannon. But I'm really looking forward to figuring it out together. And I'm reminded of it as I see your faces on the little Brady Bunch screen. So thank you for being here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yes, I would also.
And,
Can I say something?
and Scott, any comments from you?
Oh, I think Stacy had something to say, so I'll let her jump
Oh,
in.
did you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that Zoom isn't the end all of meetings, but it is better than nothing. And that if, obviously it will work for our type of committee work. So, or subcommittee work, I guess, if that's what we have to do. So that's all.
Yeah, my real quick comment on that. My only hesitancy is public participation. One thing I really want to try to do is be as open as possible to make sure that people understand what we're doing, why we're doing it. I think that helps sell it, for lack of a better word. If people understand it, they're usually more likely to accept it. So my big concern with this format is just, some people just don't have the technology or don't want to do it this way. So hopefully we can figure out over time some other means, especially once we start going into the growth policy reviews. But thank you for the input.
Brian, can I make a comment?
Uh-huh.
Can I piggyback on that exact topic? So
Sure.
I don't know if you've had a chance to chat with Michael DeCellis. He's the chair of the conservation board. It's the newest city board. And they have been doing, even when they're meeting in person, they have some sort of virtual option for folks that want to participate but can't be there in person. So that's just an idea I wanted to float past you as the chair and let you know that there is a board that's already doing it. If you're curious how that's working, you might reach out to somebody on the conservation board like Michael, or I think Jonathan is the secretary, Jonathan Edinger. Disorder. Danger. Sorry, G. I did a hard one. It should be softer. But just a thought for you as we're moving forward. That's an interesting option potentially, especially for the most vulnerable people in our community that want to participate, but for personal health reasons are apprehensive about mixing in crowds.
Yeah, the one nice thing is was having the call-in option to this, at least so if people don't, most people now have at least most everybody has a phone, so they may not be able to work the camera angle of it, but at least they can call in, which is a really nice option to be able to have with the paid function with the license that the city has. But yeah, thanks for that. Scott, back to you. Got any comments for the group?
Faith sent out an email about a city email. Did everybody get an email on this group about that? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have brought that up. She's testing out a new global address list that's a generic, it's just a generic email so that they don't post our personal emails. Like if somebody asks, hey, we would like to provide comment to the growth board, I'm just the growth board, the planning board or the zoning board, instead of the city giving out individual contact information, they're just going to now give them those generic addresses, and so we'll all receive those, but that's what that is. Thanks for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that.
So does that mean it's one address per person, or is it the same address for all the planning board? I don't quite follow that.
Everybody you should have that email in your box. I think she sent it on Monday. And I don't have it written down here what it is, but it's something like Livingston Planning Board at whatever. If somebody sends it to that address, it'll come to all of us.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, I have it in front of me. It's cityplanboard@livingstonmontana.org.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
it's the same thing, like if somebody wants to email all the commissioners, there's like this one standard email address, and then all 5 of us get it instead of typing out 5 names. So it's really nice as a volunteer board member that your personal email address isn't being distributed to the public.
Right.
So this should like forward it, because you guys don't get city email addresses as planning board members, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I got like a new email address when I was, so it's just nice. It's like a layer of,
yeah, it's just
protection.
it's a little bit of privacy, just so that
Yeah.
people don't get our individual emails. And yeah, I like it. It was a great initiative, I think, on their part. Thanks for bringing that up, Scott. I was going to mention that.
And I think I would echo what Melissa said about having new board members. It's exciting to have a new group. And with that, you likely will be challenged by your friends, family, neighbors. And so I would encourage everybody to be cognizant of when you speak, if you are on a controversial topic and there's a view that when you speak, you want to make sure if you're for something, against something, just be very definitive on what your audience is, and because you will be challenged. I'm not quite know how to say this, but it's if you're going to be very controversial about something, and that's your personal opinion and not the opinion of the board, that should be known at the time that you speak, because you can get suckered in. I just speak from experience, and I see a lot of shaking heads. So I was just cautioning you to know your audience and be very thoughtful and deliberate when you say something, especially in a public forum. Did I say that eloquently enough, Brian?
Very.
Melissa?
Yeah, no, totally. Totally. Great statement.
And I'm sure we're all professional and we'll all handle it, but it can be challenging at times because somebody will bend your ear at the wrong time. Thank you for volunteering.
Yes. Do you have anything else, Scott?
Nope, that's it.
No, thanks. That's great advice. And somebody mentioned that early on when I became a planning board member last year about this time, and I found out it was very sage advice. So thank you for mentioning that to our new members and reminding all of us. I don't have any comments. I've babbled enough. Quick review of action items. I have 2 action items. One is I'm going to follow up with Mike Cardos sometime here. I'm sorry, I have 3 action items. To follow up with Mike Cardos regarding his communications with Burton to get their latest game plan as far as how they look at taking the growth policy across the finish line as far as timing goes, as far as ensuring we can get enough public participation and enough time to review the drafts and get those up to the commission. The second action item is for all of us to review the bylaws to see if there's anything in there that we may want to change. Again, I'll get an updated copy of just the bylaws from, I'm hoping that Faith has a copy of those versus having to look through that entire packet. And then finally, I'll follow up with Jim Woodhull to ensure he can continue with the subdivision approval process training at our next session. that'll be pretty much the entire agenda. When I was talking with him originally, we talked that would probably be about an hour or so with Q&A. So we won't add, if we do that, we won't really add any new business or any other business. We'll have some public comment probably, approve the minutes, and then if there's anything really new on the growth policy, we'll give a quick update on that, but really the meeting will be focused strictly on the training session. Any other action items that I might have missed besides those three?
I just have a couple for myself that I flagged.
Okay.
One is just keep me posted about your communication with Michael, please, in case you need. I'll just want to make sure that that's information's getting to you, or if I need to help, let me know.
Thank you.
An editable version of the information from Burton. And then at the next, well, I have another commission meeting, at least one, before we meet again. So I'll make sure, I'll do my best to put it in my notes that, to flag for the other commissioners, that if there's something specific that the commission is wanting from the planning board in regards to the review process, that we need to be proactive about communicating that back to the board so that we can move in a timely fashion. So I'll just flag that, or I put it in my book, so I need to remember to put it in my comments for my next commission meeting.
Melissa, that was in regards to the growth policy,
yes,
or
thank
in
you.
general?
To
Okay.
the growth policy, thank you. That's what I was thinking, but didn't say.
I gotcha, thanks. Excuse me a sec here as I write frantically.
I think the turnaround times are going to be really pretty tight. And so the better communication we can have sooner, the better it is for all of us.
I
think.
agree with you. I agree with you. Thank you. The next meeting will be June 17th, our normal third Wednesday at 5:30 of every month. I just put one thing in parentheses just so this all stayed on our immediate radar scope, is we are required by statute to have meetings in the month of January, April, July, and October. So just want to always have that on there so we remember, in case we want to take a month off or something, we can say, oh, maybe we shouldn't take that month off. But anyway, obviously we missed April, but that was the governor's doing, so I think we're covered. I think we'll be okay there. For the next meeting agenda, I kind of already jumped into that. Again, we'll focus on the subdivision approval process, training. If that falls apart for some reason, I'll put together an agenda and shoot that out to everybody. That is one of the things that I should have mentioned as well. I will always run a draft agenda by everybody, probably 2 weeks before the meeting, so that I can get it to Faith in plenty of time to post it. So I'll ask for any input probably within 5 days or so. So please, if you see that, take a quick look at it, see if there's anything you want to add or change or delete. The other thing I wanted to introduce, and again, we don't really need to talk about it tonight, I know we're running short on time, is I thought it'd be useful to have a planning board calendar, again, strictly for planning purposes, just so we can start looking ahead, and so the community and the commission knows sort of where we're focused, not sort of, where we are focused over the next several months. There's not much to this right now, mostly because there's so much uncertainty regarding the growth policy. But you know, based on the conversations that happen here and what I'm learning from the city and Burton and others, I'll try to populate this so that we've always got kind of a template that we can run from. So I'll include this with the agenda as well. So if you want to add or make changes to it, please do so at that time. Okay. With all of that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. Thanks for working through the challenges of doing this in a virtual environment. And look forward to when I can see you all again. So we will adjourn the meeting at 7:01. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great evening. I'm going to
Thank
turn
you.
off the recording.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.